welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Danny Cannell. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and everywhere you get your podcasts on demand. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe, smash that like, and come and join us in the chat, aka the Cover 3 tailgate. Today, I'm gonna get things started with a way, you got your way too early top 25, your way too early everything rankings. Well, how about way too early game picks? So I've identified a lot of games that in their early release, some sports books call them the game of the year. Everyone's got their own way. We will be using FanDuel Sportsbook, make every moment more for a lot of our prices today. Games that have point spreads here in mid-June of less than 6 points. So 5 points or less. We're going to call those coin flip games. We're going to tear through about 30 of them over the course of the next month in a simple segment creatively called Who You Got. We'll get to that in just a little bit. So on Thursday, you gentlemen had a conversation about private equity, private capital, getting into conferences. And then came something that had a lot more fun packed in. Because the idea about private equity coming in and taking over a conference makes a lot of people nervous. But man, what's wrong with naming rights? How many times, Danny, has that stadium in Miami Gardens? I mean, we had it named after a Jimmy Buffett beer.
Yeah.
Shout out to Land Shark Stadium. We've seen lots of different iterations of this, and we get some reporting late last week about the idea of a conference selling the naming rights to the conference as a way to generate revenue. And I guess, we can get to the fun, throwing out some ideas, some suggestions. But Danny, I guess to start with, are you in? Are you in on this idea that we could see these conferences now all of a sudden have the same kind of title sponsors as a stadium or a basketball tournament or anything like that?
I am a purist at heart. So would I love it? No. But when you are looking for ways to stay competitive, just like we had the discussion about private equity, if this is an easier way to make up that gap and all you have to do is switch out the name, then who cares? Just keep cutting those checks, which probably will funnel right to the players, and I'm all good for it. So I don't have any issue with it whatsoever. If the New York Yankees, one of the most, stuck up, prideful organizations ever, and I am a Yankees fan, but they do things the right way. If they can have a patch on the side of their jersey that's a logo that they're getting paid for, why couldn't the Big 12? And I don't think anybody should have a problem with it.
Danny wouldn't be allowed to play for the Yankees right now, not until he's shaved.
Listen, guys, if for those of you who are listening at home, this is one to come back and check out on YouTube because Aaron jumping in saying DK's ready to pitch for Florida State, North Carolina playing an elimination game out in Omaha. We've also got Grant. DK's song from the bullpen is Thunderstruck. Jeffrey, DK about to go full Hulk Hogan. And then one last one, Beach Wine guy. Danny's got an 18-wheeler fully loaded that he's got to run to Des Moines after the show.
Yeehaw! Let's go. Somehow, because there is the rules that George Steinbrenner enforced with no long hair, facial hair, but mustaches were allowed.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite players of the Yankees was Goose Gossage, Rich Goose Gossage, who had a glorious handlebar, a little bit wider down here. He was one of my favorite players. He rocked the handlebars back in the day. So this is an ode to him. So I could still don the pinstripes just to make the point.
Yeah. Fu Manchu's fantastic. Again, if you're listening at home, come on back to youtube.com/cover3 so you can at least get a good look at that. Tom, we've had a couple days to think about this, fire some jokes off, some suggestions. The idea that if All-State is in fact in the mix for the Big 12, do you have a mayhem division? Do you have do you take the sponsorship deal so far that we really lean in on it?
I mean, yeah, if you're gonna do it. I'm with Danny. I don't like the idea just on principle, but I mean, the Big 12 hasn't been it's not like the Big 12's been the Big 12 for 100 years. Like it used to be the Big 8, it changed its name when it expanded, and we've made fun of like leagues like the Big 10 still calling itself the Big 10 even though it now has 18 teams in it. So, like I don't think there's the kind of tradition there to where it's like if the SEC changed its name and the Big 10 changed its name, that would be weird, but I bet you they do at some point. But
Especially if this goes off and they see the money, the dollar signs come in, they absolutely will.
yeah, but like the Big 12 this year is a completely new league. Like it's not what we think of when we think of the Big 8 or the Big 12. It's a completely different league that now expands from West Virginia all the way across into the Southwest, so into Arizona. So if they want to change the name, I'm fine with it. If they're going to go the corporate route to get money, whatever. Everything in sports these days is sponsored or presented by somebody anyway, so it's really not that big of a deal to me. But of the ideas that I saw, my favorite, and this has been pitched by a billion people, is if Southwest Airlines buys the rights to the conference, because then we can call it the Southwest Conference.
Just because wasn't one of the things that they were going to do away with Big and that it would replace like with the sponsor name?
Southwest 12 or the
Yeah.
All-State 12. Ooh.
Well, also, if you're going to take this opportunity, wouldn't you want to match the number, or are you leaving room for growth? Like, why does it have to be 12? You know, like at some point, like if you're going to like start over and you're going to do this and you're going to go with naming rights, wouldn't you keep the Big and lose the 12, like lose the number that's not even accurate, or just name it something completely new? I don't know if there was ever an opportunity, kind of like we're talking about, to rebrand, it would absolutely be now with all the movement, all the shuffling, 4 new teams coming in. Like now's the opportunity to do it, but it's college football, so they'll keep 12 for sure.
Well, all right. So I think to Tom's point, the Big 10 is less of a way to identify the number of teams in the standings as much as it is a brand unto itself. The idea, like you say, Big 10 school, and there is something that even with the expansion of the Big 10 school, big universities with lots of alumni, like for the most part, and listen, the demographic is changing as that we're welcoming in, USC, Oregon, Washington, but like UCLA fits, right? Big public school, lots of alumni. So I think that's more of a brand where if they ventured off that to get rid of the name, that would be quite a statement. They also don't need to be making up any kind of revenue gap. But with the way that conferences have expanded, you've already kind of lost me in terms of trying to hold on to something sacred with a conference name. Like that's okay. I mean, Rutgers UCLA is a conference game. We've got the NC State's going to play Cal out in Berkeley in an Atlantic Coast Conference game. So, if you're going to make little tweaks along the way, I'm fine with that, because what are you holding on to exactly? Because it doesn't exist here in 2024.
So you're saying if like the ACC changed its name, you wouldn't like have any kind of whatever about it?
Oh, I've already told you it's the Hardee's Conference. Hardee's, before they got in with, sorry, no free ads, but before they got in with Carl's Jr., it was more of a regional franchise situation. Hardee's actually had fried chicken in a lot of North Carolina locations. And in fact, every year at the ACC tournament, they would have this basketball that they would make for a commemorative basketball for the ACC tournament. And it would have all the different logos of all the different teams. And if you are of a certain generation, the Hardee's basketball that you could go get at your regional Hardee's franchise with that had fried chicken, and good fried chicken at that, that would take you back. Like if you're going to sell off the naming rights, at least give me the nostalgia drip that's going to make me remember what the good old days were with a 9-team conference and just one game on Thursday night to play into the quarterfinals on Friday.
I liked, from a flow, like ease of saying it, Chick-fil-A ACC. Like because Chick-fil-A ACC just flows off the tongue. It's sort of regional, but not as well as some of the brands that come out of there. Do you guys? So somebody said to me, I'm curious to know what you guys think of this, because you guys are way more knowledgeable on this topic than I am. Somebody said this is the continued soccerization of college football. And so I immediately like Googled Premier League, Champions League. I didn't see them have a sponsor. This would be unprecedented, wouldn't it, if they renamed a league after the brand? Because I get what people are saying. Soccer, they were the first to have ads all over the uniforms, on the fields. I get it. But from a league standpoint, or even a team, are there teams? Those have named, right? Like they have naming rights for teams, right?
The soccer leagues do have presenting sponsors. Like
But it's
you don't,
presented by.
but it's like it's the way I think this would go. Like I don't know if it would. The Big 12 is a weird thing because again, it doesn't really have that kind of long-term established kind of history. But it's like the Premier League is the Barclays Premier League, but nobody mentions Barclays. I can't remember who's currently sponsoring La Liga right now in Spain, but it's them. Serie A has the
TIM?
Yeah, TIM, whatever they are, but nobody ever uses it. It's just in the logo every time, like you see it on television, there'll be like a little TIM logo or whatever the league, it's there. So it's kind of like the patch on the jersey. Like the New York Yankees might have an official presenting sponsor, but nobody calls them the Merrill Lynch New York Yankees. It's just the New York Yankees. So yeah, it's there, and you're going to start seeing it because we already have seen it too. Like they also mentioned last week that now you can do the advertising on the field. Like you can put the logos on the field for sponsors, and you see that in soccer along the baselines. You see that with the boards around the field, and I think you're going to start seeing a whole hell of a lot more of that in football too. It's going to look like baseball a few years ago. There were never any ads on the walls in the majors, and then there was one, and then there was two. And now if you watch a Major League Baseball game, the entire outfield fence at a lot of stadiums is nothing but ads. And I think that's going to be coming to college football too. So it's going to be slow, and we're going to notice it at first, and there's going to be a lot of pushback, and then people are just going to stop noticing it.
Phillips 66, I think, sponsors every Big 12 conference tournament.
Yes. Yeah.
Like the Phillips 66 men's basketball tournament, women's basketball tournament, baseball tournament. I want to say they're also in there with a couple other. It was one basketball conference tournament season where I realized that Phillips 66 was holding down 3 conferences, with the naming rights. It's the New York Life ACC tournament. But, the whole daggum conference, it would be the next step. I think that we are already pretty much like further down the line than that. And where I started, stadiums is just my easiest reference point in terms of you just get over.
What mine is? What mine? Bowl games. The FedEx, Orange Bowl, the Allstate Sugar Bowl, the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl. You go down the list. Every bowl at some point, in major bowls. Has the Rose Bowl ever? Or have they all? I mean, I know they do things differently and they've sucked. I don't think they have. I mean, other than ESPN having all of the bowl season, I don't know if the Rose Bowl's ever been corrupted. But most of them have had some sort of naming rights.
Oh, it's the Rose Bowl presented by Prudential.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm like Tom. I think people will get over it. Did you see the Yankees Star Insurance is the patch that they put on, and so I had an argument with a buddy of mine because I was like, I would pay more because you know what happens when you buy the jersey in the shop, it's going to come with the Star Insurance logo because that's the official jersey. And I said, I would pay more to have the jersey clean without the patch. Did you know that they're actually selling them at a premium for more with the logo? And so the argument was, well, what if Aaron Judge hit 74 home runs this year and he breaks the record or whatever it is? You would want to have the jersey that he wore that season because what if the Star logo goes away and it's some other company? I would want it clean. But like the soccer jerseys, they vary by year, and you want that year.
We've got Paramount is on the front of Inter Milan.
Yeah,
and maybe
a couple other teams,
and a couple other teams
one
too.
of them.
Yeah, and it looks good too because they've locked in. Like Inter Milan's got the blue and the black, and so the Paramount blue, it just kind of looks good. It fits. So it definitely varies in terms of that big logo right here on the front of the soccer uniform.
And with soccer uniforms, it's like while the home uniform is typically the same every year with different sponsors, the road uniforms are different. But like some teams do, like there's Celtic in Scotland, who's a big team that they sell their shirts where you can pay more to get it without the sponsor on it.
They're like
what's the most you guys have ever paid for a jersey?
110, I think.
Yeah, like 120.
That sounds about right for me. I went to a Panthers game. I'm a huge hockey guy now, by the way. Let's go Panthers.
Yeah.
I went to a game against the Rangers. I was like, oh, I'll get a. They're kind of hockey jerseys are kind of cool. They're like multi-use, they're sweaters.
They're more expensive.
So I was like, oh, I want to get one. $275.
Yeah,
was the jersey in there, and I was like, do you guys have any cheaper ones? You feel like that guy. It was packed. They had one. It was $175. It definitely was like way cheaper down below. And then she's like, how do you know? I was like, how do you know the difference? And and it didn't have a name on the back, and it had no number. I wanted a number. I was going to get 13. And she goes, oh, you have to pull them up. She's like, they have the strap, the official strap that's in the official game jersey, which I guess is known to like keep the jersey down so they can't pull it over your head, which I have no idea why those are in fan jerseys, like why they have to be that official.
Well, in case you get in a fight, in this game.
Get pretty bad. But I did not. I got, instead of getting a jersey, I got my sweet Panthers hat. It was way cheaper.
I like if you're going to continue to be frequenting the Panthers games, I like to go with the pullover. Like I've got a couple Hurricanes t-shirts that you can have especially for when it's warm outside, and then right before you go in, you just throw on the Hurricanes pullover over top, and it's you're not getting to wear the sweet sweater like everybody else, but you got team gear on, and it's appropriate for what you need, because you do need the sweater, because this is crazy, and I know a lot of people don't realize it, especially in the South where it is not cold outside. Buddy, they have to keep that thing real cold to keep the ice from melting inside. So you need to be able to go, especially in a playoff game, to go in there with some kind of outer layer.
I'd like to addend my statement. The most I ever spent on a jersey was 150, because now that you mentioned it, the Brent Seabrook Blackhawks sweater I have was 150, but that was 10 years ago. I guess prices have gone up, or the Panthers are really just trying to cash in on that Stanley Cup fever. Like, yeah, $300. Here you go. You can have your jersey.
Mistake. I should have. It was, I think the game, I forget what night it was, but we went and bought them tried to buy at the stadium. Like, didn't go buy a Dick's or a Sporting, like somewhere else to look cheaper. Because I think we were paying a premium for being at the stadium too.
Yeah, they almost got you. I think the hat was a great way to get out of that situation.
Yeah. I would say I'm past the jersey buying portion of my life, but there's a Caleb Williams jersey on the mail on the way here.
Oh, it is. Is it going to get there in October?
I don't know.
Wasn't that like a controversy a little bit?
Yeah,
I ordered it.
Tickets.
Yeah, I ordered it before the draft, and it still isn't here. So
wow.
But I did get an email the other day saying it's on the way. So fingers crossed.
All right. Coming up on the other side, we're going to roll through. This is the beginning of a long series of segments. We're roll through some of the coin flip games on the 2024 college football schedule, plus dark horse candidates, non-favorites to win the conference in the Big Ten, SEC, ACC, Big 12, and more. Next.
Have you heard of semaglutides? Ozempic, Mounjaro?
Hartman, this could be dangerous. Let's do it.
South Park, The End of Obesity. New exclusive event. Now streaming. Exclusively on Paramount Plus.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast. Again, we're going to be rolling through some of the games in the 2024 season that have good stakes, a lot of interest, but also close spreads. So I'm sorry, while Clemson and Georgia clearly is going to generate a lot of interest, the Bulldogs are 13.5-point favorites in that game. They do not make the cut. However, another matchup between ACC and SEC schools is, so in Charlotte, we're going to have Tennessee against NC State. Tom, we're not picking against any spread here. I just want to know, Tennessee and NC State playing at the beginning of the season, who you got?
Coin flips. I'm going to go with the quarterback I trust the most. It's early in the year, but it's got to be Nico.
ACC.
Well, it's got to be Tennessee. Sorry, I got to go with Nico. He's the chosen one. He will be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And also, I think that, we all know how I feel about Dave Doeren at NC State, but I just think right now, with a couple of the guys Tennessee has up front on defense, combined with Nico at QB, giving them the edge right now. I think NC State will be a force to be reckoned with in the ACC, but I don't think they get this game.
Excuse me. Sorry about that. I think you're probably right. I would love to take the other side. I think Dave Doran could have a game plan, though, for Nico to kind of confuse him. This will be his first big game on the spotlight. Well, the other thing, too, that concerns me is Grayson McCall outside of the Jamie Chadwell system has not been as spectacular as he was within that system.
Sure.
So, I'll be curious to see what, it is hard. I think we take for granted so many times players just hopping from one system to another. They're just going to be as good. There's always sort of a learning curve. Concerned about picking up the edge with potentially, I've seen some, NFL draft mocks saying James Pierce could be one of the top picks in the NFL draft. So that, he's somebody that could wreak havoc. But I think this is one of those games where the reason I think it's a good matchup for ACC versus SEC, NC State, I do think is one of the more physical teams in the conference.
Mhm.
So I don't think they'll struggle with the physicality of Tennessee. I think it's a really fun game.
Really, really fun game. There was some retention on the defensive side of the ball for NC State that will come in handy going up against Josh Heupel's offense and Nico Iamaleava. I do think it was interesting when we look back at last year, a step back undoubtedly from where that offense was humming with Hendon Hooker in 2022. How much of that is the quarterback that you had? How much of that also is the absence of two NFL wide receivers on the outside, and just sort of trying to, continue to maintain the level of production. I think that the two things that NC State did with their roster that are going to give themselves the best chance to be able to take down the Vols are retaining key defensive players, and then some of the pickups that they had from the transfer portal at wide receiver, a guy named Noah Rogers, he's like ACC brand Jamison Williams. Noah Rogers couldn't get on the field at Ohio State, but he's still a really talented player. And since he's arrived in Raleigh, a lot of people are impressed and think that he can have a good season in that offense. We remember Casey Concepcion was like a really flashy freshman at the beginning of the year. They got Jordan Waters from Duke, who's a good running back. I'm gonna go Wolfpack. I think that they can get it done. I'd be more concerned. I referenced this game earlier. I'd be more concerned about the trip to Cal. I'd be more concerned about what happens when you get deeper into the year and you've got that mid-October road trip to Berkeley than necessarily what's going to happen in Charlotte, where you are going to have, Tennessee, NC State, they're going to pack that thing out. It's going to be a great, is the Duke's Mayo Kickoff Classic, by the way, week 2, one of the best games of week 2, Tennessee and NC State.
Will there be a Mayo bath for this one?
I hope not. That's got to be saved for the bowl.
Okay, that's fair.
Keep the bowls unique and special.
Well, listen, you're going to get a lot of Mayo content, and Tubby will be there.
Thank God. What's a football game without a walking?
I don't know. I don't know if NC State wins. I don't know if I envision Dave Doran embracing the Mayo bath. He's going to be like, we all on to next week, and Heupel maybe saying it's a game.
Carolina for that very reason.
I
will say, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on the show, but the Duke's Mayo Bowl, we talk about bowl sponsorships. We talked about sponsorships earlier in the show. Duke's Mayo may have been the most effective sponsor that I've ever had in sports, because when they sent the care package before the first Duke's Mayo Bowl, and it included Duke's mayonnaise, as a Chicagoan, we didn't really have Duke's Mayo up here. I'd never had it. Ever since, this has been a Duke's Mayo household. So that was an effective sponsorship.
Hey, listen, you got to have that twang. That's twang, zang. Shout out to the Charlotte Sports Foundation. And to your point about the Mayo bath, I don't know if you remember this, but NC State was actually in the Duke's Mayo Bowl against Maryland, and it is a game that I allege neither coach wanted to win. Final score, Maryland 16, NC State 12. And the decision-making from both Mike Locksley and Dave Doran in the final stages of this low-scoring rock fight sure suggested no one didn't want a Mayo bath. Now, credit to Locks, who then put on the super big hat for the Mayo bath. You know, the
Yes,
oversized
the big
hat.
hat. Yeah.
Yeah, the big hat. And so he at least went along with it a little bit. But yeah, I know we'll have Tubby. I know we'll have a lot of mayonnaise content. I don't think we'll have the Mayo bath, but if we do find that out, I'll be sure to pass along word. Okay. From that game to another one that I'm sure is going to get a lot of attention because the Buffs are going to be on the road going to Lincoln. And Danny, I got to ask,
Do you believe?
in Colorado, winning against Nebraska in the matchup of Deion Sanders' team against Matt Rule's team, Dylan Raiola, Shedeur Sanders, it is going to be a centerpiece of the conversation that weekend.
What's the line at now?
Let's see.
Do you have it handy? Because I think it was around a touchdown, but then it was at 8. And I think it's kind of fluctuated back and forth. I've seen a lot of odds coming back towards Colorado's favor. Like they are getting more optimism around the program. I felt I could not have been more wrong. I remember last year, like bet the house on TCU laying 20. It's down to 5.
5.
I'm laying them all day long with Nebraska. Call me crazy. I just don't know how you can trust this team. And I know and just a little preview, potentially. We're doing dark horses later. Maybe you'll hear this team come up again.
You said 6,500, and I was like,
I know. Dylan Raiola's first big game. There's way too much unknown at the surrounding supporting cast at Colorado. Too much turmoil towards the end of last season. Sea of red. Place is going to be rocking. I'm going Nebraska.
If I'm going with the same kind of philosophy I did with the last pick, I kind of have to go with Colorado. Like it's early in the year for Dylan Raiola. He will be inexperienced. Shedeur has plenty of experience. The concern for me picking Colorado on the road against Nebraska will be their defense, because I do think Nebraska has far and away the best defense in this game, and I think that will pose problems. But for all I think of Shedeur's shortcomings, which he has some, I think one thing he was great at is he still didn't turn the ball over. And I think that plays well on the road in that environment if he's able to take care of the ball the same way he did last year, even if it means eating some sacks, which I'd like him to find a better balance between the two. But, whatever. I'll go with Colorado here, just early in the season. If it's later in the season, I'm probably taking Nebraska.
That might be it is a principle with any team that you have depth concerns.
Mm-hmm.
When do you play them? You're going to be playing them later. So I think home field is going to matter a ton, and not because boosters have been buying hundreds of tickets to keep the sellout streak going, but because I think that Nebraska is actually jazzed. Like I think that they feel, and whether or not that will be, replicated on the field is something that is going to be a fun storyline, because it's either going to hit, and the way we talk about Matt Rule, the way that we talk about Nebraska, all those things could really change from where they were in the last couple of years, or they'll fall short of expectations, and then the disappointment and the passion and everything else will be a big part of the conversation in the Big Ten. I think Nebraska and Memorial Stadium is going to be rocking for that game, and I see Tony White dialing up, just dialing up some big third down stops here.
Memorial Stadium has been sold out for a long time, and it has been rocking for a lot of home games. And Nebraska's 9-12 at home for the last 3 years. I don't know if the home field match is going to matter that much.
All right, so you don't believe in the sellout streak's only been kept alive by mega boosters?
Oh, I 100% believe in that. I'm just saying it's always a very good and raucous environment. There are very few fan bases, I think, in the country as loyal and supportive as Nebraska football fans, because they are always there.
But they haven't had this much legit. They haven't.
I have seen Nebraska lose at home to some mediocre football teams the last few years,
true.
Chip. The crowd hasn't done a whole lot for them that matters more than what's on the field. Now, maybe, again, I do think Nebraska is going to be better this year. But I don't think that home field advantage is going to matter much in this game.
We'll see. All right. And then the third one that we're going to do here is so even though it's a non-conference game, it is in the Big Ten on CBS slot. This game will be at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. It is the Cyhawk Trophy, Iowa State at Iowa. And this one really is like true coin flip. Looking at it right now, about 2. Iowa favored by about 2. Tom, who you got?
Iowa. Without even thinking about it. And I wrote, I've got, well, we'll get more to it later. I've got Iowa State as one of my, kind of dark horsey teams. But if you just look at the history of this series, it's been a coin flip a lot of the time.
I thought you always a road team too, right? Don't road teams have a lot of success?
Maybe against the spread, but as far as winning the series, like Iowa, let me see if I could find it real quick, but Iowa kind of dominates this series.
Especially with Kirk Ferentz.
Yeah.
Like over the last 20, 25 years, it's been pretty lopsided. I am with Tom on this one. As much as I like Rocco Becht and what they've done at Iowa State, new offensive coordinator, depth, I think, comes into play. New offense for Iowa. I'm kind of excited to see what that looks like. I just think this is one of those ones where Iowa is the more physical team. Take the under, though. There's no doubt on the under, right? Whatever it is. Just
although, I mean, this game has a tendency to get like 55 to 52 in triple overtime. But yeah, looking at it overall, Iowa leads at 47-23. And like at the very start of the Ferentz era, like Iowa lost the first 4 under Ferentz. But since then, they have won like 3 to every one that Iowa State has won.
Iowa State won last year?
No, Iowa won last year.
Last year, 20-13. The year before, Iowa State went 10-7. That's the thing. When Iowa State wins, it's usually a stupid score. Like 9-6, 10-7. Yeah.
Something like they were just hanging around all game and then break it
44-41 in 2011.
Yeah, I'm there's a position that I'm not all the way in on, but that Iowa State was so thrown off by the gambling scandal at the beginning of last year that you might want to give a little bit of a boost to the way you're thinking about them now that all of that has passed. That you would maybe look at early season results especially and just start to imagine not just the absence of players, but the fact that it was ongoing, the investigation and everything else. Just something that I'm at least considering as we're starting to run through all the different analysis of this. But that said, give me Iowa.
Another angle worth considering, though, Iowa's got a brand new offense, right? They're playing Illinois State to open the season. We're probably not going to see a whole hell of a lot of what they plan to do. This will be the first game I think we actually see Iowa's offense, so it's going to make it more difficult for the Cyclones to prepare for it because they're not going to be sure what's coming.
Yep. Also, remember, don't take any expectations based on the result of this game for how either team will fare in conference play. It exists in a universe unto itself.
This is like a separate season.
Yeah, and we get to peer in on this special universe on CBS. We're very fired up about it. All right, coming up on the other side, we got a little hints there. A few teams that we might be circling in the Big 10, the Big 12, but we'll hit them all. Who are the dark horse candidates for 2024? We'll get into that and more next.
There's some new players in town, and they brought the plague.
Got my attention. You don't want that. What happened to Kingstown?
Mayor of Kingstown. New season now streaming exclusively on Paramount Plus.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast at some point in the offseason, and definitely before we start to dig into our win totals, which will begin next month. We like to go through and try and identify some teams that are not at the top of the odds board across the conferences, and then maybe even some playoff picks. So I like to leave this a little bit flexible. I think it leads to some interesting discussions. Tom, let's just go ahead and jump into it. Tom, who's your dark horse for the Big 10?
I can only pick one.
You can do dark horses.
Yeah, give us more.
C's.
I broke this up into 2 categories. I have to win the league and then dark horses to reach the playoff. Which one would you like to hear?
To win the league.
All right, my dark horse to win the Big Ten is Michigan.
Michigan currently, as I'm looking at it, plus 700 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. That is, as we were talking on the group chat, outside of the top three, though it is the top pick outside of the top three.
The fourth.
What's your what's the starting point here?
The defense is still going to be ridiculously good because they kept a whole lot of their studs, and offensively, like, it's not like Sharon Moore has never coached a game for Michigan. You seem to recall him beating both Ohio State and Penn State as head coach last year. So I don't know how big of a concern that truly is as far as game day. Like, we'll see the difference in Sharon Moore preparing Michigan day in, day out for an entire year, everything leading up to a season. There could be some change there with the change in leadership. But also approach-wise, like, I know Michigan's got a ton to replace. Like, they lost pretty much everybody on offense. They've got a new offensive line. They've got a new quarterback. They've got to have new receivers, new running backs, blah, blah, blah. And I get it. But it's just they had a first-round quarterback last year, but their approach offensively was if they had a seventh-round quarterback. Like, it was third and JJ, whereas they would just try to get into third and manageable and let JJ bail them out. So they're still going to be grounding and pounding and running the ball heavily. And I have some faith that Michigan, even if they have to replace their entire offensive line was banged up a lot last year, and the guys who came in were serviceable and plus value. So I trust in their offensive line development. Maybe it'll be a little shaky earlier in the year, but I think as the season goes along, they're still going to be Michigan, and they're still going to try to beat teams up, and they're still, like, it's going to be hard to score 20 points against them. So their offense doesn't have to be phenomenal for them to win games. So I don't think it's completely out of line. Like, I think we're all just kind of writing off the 3-time defending conference champions and the reigning national champion a little too easily.
Danny?
I think you make great points. I went dark horse, but I think you could be spot on, like, because, I mean, this team has won 3 in a row. And if you're them, you're like, we've lost guys before. I mean, they lost. Technically, they've lost guys, Aiden Hutchinson, Cade McNamara, like, they lost their quarterback. I know they benched him, but they've been through change before. Sharon Moore is going to be an extension of the Jim Harbaugh philosophy. I think, he learned from him. It's his mentor. So it's not like you're seeing a complete shift like you're seeing at Bama. So I get what you're
love
saying.
you, coach.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think the players do like him. I think that's, and I think they've recruited really well. So they definitely can do it. So I don't hate the pick. I mean, you could see Alex Orji be an absolute beast running the football. And then that opens up the pass game. I think he really could be a version of Jalen Milroe. Like, question marks. Is he the guy? We haven't seen him throw very much. And then all of a sudden he's top 5 in the Heisman Trophy, and he might even get benched at some point earlier in the season, but he's a phenomenal athlete and could figure it out as they go on. So I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all.
All right. So Michigan is going to be facing how many teams that can block Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham? I mean,
one.
All right. Texas probably can. Oregon. I mean, at least, like, not in a way that's going to destruct everything. I mean, like, Washington, which just lost every single offensive line starter, is not going to be able to block Grant and Graham.
No.
Michigan State is not going to be able to block Grant and Graham. Those are going to be games that, to your point, Tom, you can almost use the second half Penn State playbook.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go out there and we're just going to destroy the line of scrimmage, and we're going to let Donovan Edwards and Alex Orji and this run game be able to get us in position to score and be able to do just enough without having to risk too much to be able to get the job done.
And go to the biggest game they have on their schedule. Like, Ohio State, talent-wise, is far and away the best team in the Big Ten. It might be the best team in the country. Like, they are stacked. But what's the one area of Ohio State that we're not sure about?
Offensive line.
Yeah. Like, that is, if Ohio State fails this season, I guarantee you it's going to be the offensive line that fails them. Maybe the QB.
All right, Danny.
All right, I went darker. I went even further. All right, hear me out, okay? Because I do think if you were going, like, it's risky to go outside the top 4 teams, the top 4 programs, which according to the odds makers, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Michigan. Michigan still, I would group in that group of, one of those you wouldn't be crazy surprised. So
then the prices drop. Like, we're going to be going through some
big time
where there's a lot more, evenly spread prices.
Yes.
At FanDuel Sportsbook, Michigan at plus 700, 4th on the board. USC is 5th on the board, but at plus 2,500. And that jump is clearly the line where I think you get the deep dark horse category.
Okay, hear me out. On October 26th, when Nebraska travels to the Shoe, they will be undefeated at that point.
All right,
can you see that scenario unfold?
UTEP, Colorado, Northern Iowa, Illinois, Purdue, Rutgers, and then at Indiana prior to that. So can Nebraska
see that unfolding,
undefeated?
Right?
Yes.
I can also see Nebraska being 4-3 or 3-4.
It's true. I did a segment with Mackenzie Brooks on our, she works with our Sportsline crew, and we were doing win totals. And I said one of my favorites was Nebraska over 7.5, I think. And she was talking about the Dylan Raiola, bump. And she's like, well, we don't see it as significant as you do. I think they had it like 0.4 games difference over, the previous. And I was like, those quarterbacks were horrific last year. 5 1-possession games, 4 to finish the season. And then I went back and I watched the spring game, which you can be fooled by, but wearing the number 15 jersey, training with Patrick Mahomes, the mannerisms are similar. He put up big numbers, 16 of 22 for 239, 2 touchdowns and interception. Could we possibly see the emergence of a superstar like we've seen before from young quarterbacks? Jameis Winston emerged all of a sudden with high expectations out of Florida State. Manziel came out of nowhere from A&M. We've seen young quarterbacks change the face of programs. That's why Nebraska won the bidding war. They wanted him to come home, but play for where his dad played. That all of those things would have to unfold. And then I think the thing that's interesting about the Big Ten, and you have to do this if you're hearing me out, is let's say Michigan does struggle to, replace some of those pieces. Let's say they're a little bit, the defense is not as dominant. Say Ohio State, as good as we think they're going to be, what if it falls flat? What if Will Howard struggles? Penn State concerns me. That was one I was like, how do you make the case against them? Let's just say the Andy Koltnicki hire doesn't, work out and the offense still sputters. Making the case. So I would say if Nebraska did win, it would have to be, they'd probably be a 10-2 champion, 10-2 versus another, or maybe even 9-3. And there's a little bit of carnage at the top of the Big Ten, which is hard to fathom because those teams are dominant, those top 4. But that was my long plus 6,500. Why not?
I mean, the ingredients you look for are there if you're trying to look for an extreme long shot. You mentioned Raiola, so they have a chance to have one of the better quarterbacks in the league. You mentioned that schedule. It's not unrealistic for them to be 7-0 going to Ohio State simply because there isn't a game on that schedule leading up to it that you're like, they've got no chance in hell of winning. And you look at after Ohio State, UCLA at home, a bye, USC on the road, which USC's, it's going to be a solid team, but that's not exactly an unwinnable game if you're playing well. Wisconsin at home, and then you finish at Iowa on Black Friday. So, this schedule does not have Penn State. It does not have Michigan. It does not have Oregon. So, there is a path if everything clicks for this team that, they can reach the Big Ten championship. I'm not going to go there. I think you're a little drunk on the Runzas, but I do think that a lot of the ingredients you look for when it looks for a dark horse like this, Nebraska checks a lot of boxes.
Most of mine were schedule based. Who could you see getting hot and then avoiding the right teams or the wrong teams, however you look at it?
So when it was announced that CBS is going to be broadcasting the Big Ten title game this year, one of our editors reached out and said, could you put together the 5 most likely matchups? And I went through and I wrote the piece. And as I was starting to, put it all together, one thing that I found is that a lot of the teams that I find most likely to be in the Big Ten title game all play each other in the regular season. That the chances of a rematch in the Big Ten title game are kind of likely because Ohio State plays Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, right? Because you've got a lot of these crossovers. My dark horse is Lincoln. My dark horse is USC, and they don't play Ohio State and they don't play Oregon. And like, if I'm, much respect to Penn State, but I think that Penn State's closer to Michigan than they are to Ohio State and Oregon. That Ohio State and Oregon, for me, are legitimate top 4 teams in the country. And so by avoiding those two, USC has a huge road trip to Michigan, another game that will be on CBS. But they get Penn State at home, and pretty much every other conference game is manageable. So you mentioned carnage. That's where I think the USC path is, because so many of those top teams beat each other. All it takes is for one of the losers of those games to then lose a game that they shouldn't do, which, hey, college football happens all the time. That would open up the path for even a one-loss, Trojans team to be able to get there. So when we're up there at plus 2,500 at FanDuel Sportsbook, I think the Big Ten was the toughest to get a dark horse that you feel really good about, because I've got so much. I feel so strongly about Ohio State and Oregon, but I think that USC schedule-wise and just pedigree-wise, when you're talking about Lincoln Riley, the talent level, the redone defensive staff, like if USC loses to LSU and Notre Dame and it's a disappointing season, that doesn't affect their ability to go win the Big Ten. So, give me Trojans plus 2,500.
And it's, we don't know. We have questions about the offense, Miller Moss, all that stuff, but you kind of give that a benefit of the doubt when it comes to Lincoln Riley and an offense. And the question is, if they're scoring 30 points a game and their defense is just almost average, they're going to win a lot of football games. Like, the defense just has to be not abysmal. It's not like you need the Trojans to go from being where they were last year to being an elite defense to give them a chance.
All right, let's go to the SEC. Danny, what's your who's your SEC dark horse?
The SEC. All right. Again, scheduling matters. I actually had a guy on the show this morning, a guest that was a Texas A&M broadcaster, and we were doing all baseball, and I said, why shouldn't I take a Connor Wegman for Heisman at 25-1? And he's like, it's all about his health. Like, from what we've seen so far from Connor Wegman, when he's been healthy, he's been incredible. The schedule sets up perfectly. So I think it's Connor Wegman works. He's the best quarterback they've had there in a while, potential wise, but that can also get old. Like, he might get hurt again, or he doesn't pan out because we haven't seen him in a bigger body of work. But show me the game that they absolutely can't win. And the fact that they get Texas at home in the first time this is back, and
LSU at home.
Yeah, almost there is a scenario you look at where you're like, I could see them potentially being the number 1 seed in the playoff, undefeated. Now I know Aggies fans are already booking their tickets, but there is a scenario when all the talk has been about how tough it's going to be with the new expanded SEC, and teams like Florida have the toughest schedule ever and all this. Texas A&M has a really manageable schedule.
I right now plus 2,100 at FanDuel Sportsbook, and I think that's my pick too, Danny. I think they are more sensible of a pick with not just schedule, but giving Mike Elko credit here. But I think they're more sensible than Missouri, which is above them, Tennessee, which is above them, LSU, which is above them, and then we start to get into like the actual favorites. So their road trips include teams that you would power rank near the bottom of the SEC. They're going to Mississippi State. They're going to South Carolina. They play Florida and they play Arkansas at a neutral. The toughest opponents that they've got on their conference schedule, Missouri, that's going to be a game that is in College Station. LSU is in College Station. And you mentioned Texas is in College Station. Absolutely. I think Texas A&M, in terms of where they are on the odds board, is way too low, and a great pick for a dark horse to be able to make it to the SEC title game and potentially win it.
Yeah, I think it's a solid pick. But as for my pick, if we're sticking to the same outside the top 3 rule, I could take Alabama here.
Listen,
same line of thinking that you had with Michigan. Like,
but
let's just take college football play. Was Washington also a dark horse?
But here's the thing. Like in the Big Ten, historically, it's not like it's a wide open league. It has typically been dominated by two teams its entire existence, and one of those two teams is outside the top three. So dark horse, Michigan. The SEC is different. Lots of teams could have won the SEC. There's a greater depth of talent. So if I'm looking for the dark horse, I'm going for a team that I think is being slept on a little too much. 21-1 is nice. What about 42-1? What about the Oklahoma Sooners?
Oh,
who are just kind of being, everybody's super high on Texas for all the obvious reasons as the newcomer. We're all kind of just forgetting about the Sooners, who have the quarterback wild card in Jackson Arnold. What if Jackson Arnold's awesome? What if he shows up in the SEC and he's just an incredible player? What if all the work Brent Venables has done building up the line of scrimmage, which was kind of a weakness for them when it came to playing the SEC in some games in the playoff under Lincoln Riley? What if we see the benefits of that right away? And you look at the Sooners' schedule. Yeah, they get Tennessee. They've got Texas at the Cotton Bowl. They have to go to Ole Miss, but I'm sorry, Ole Miss, I think you're going to be great, but I'm not going to just suddenly look at you as a team that can't be beaten. Same with you, Mizzou. I think you're going to be really good, but you're not a team that can't be beaten. You get Alabama at home. We don't really know what Alabama is going to look like. And then you finish the year at LSU, which I think defensively is still going to have some problems this year. But you don't play Georgia. That's a bonus. So I look at the schedule. I look at the talent. I look at the possibility at quarterback. And I look at the Oklahoma Sooners as a team that maybe we're just kind of overlooking a little too easily.
I love that because I think anecdotally, every football season has one prominent team that we say, oh man, I like them, but their schedule's so tough. And they go out and win football games because of all the reasons why you said you liked them. The first part of that sentence, they are able to go out there and convert 42-1. That's a deep dark horse. I like the Sooners.
Oklahoma to win a conference, 42-1.
That is pretty wild when you put it that way. And they beat Texas last year, who everybody's so high on. And I do think it is like one of these. There's going to be some hits and misses on the young quarterbacks. There's going to be guys that have breakout stars. What if it is Jackson Arnold? It absolutely could be him. They saw both of them in practice with Dillon Gabriel, who statistically was phenomenal. They were like, yep, we're good. We're going to move on. That's a huge risk, but we've seen other coaches do that. I mean, Andy Reid did that with Alex Smith. It was like, you're good, but we have better waiting in the wings. Boy, get Oklahoma fans going. Get them going.
Brent Venables and Andy Reid, they're the one and the same.
I think for Oklahoma, it's hard to envision Oklahoma running the table, any team running the table. I think this would be more along the lines of kind of what I said about Nebraska, like if they got there. A bunch of, 10-2 teams. You see a little bit of, Georgia's not as dominant. Bama's not as dominant. No team is dominant. And Oklahoma is able to knock them off and find themselves in the right, in the right position to play for it.
That's the thing, too. Like, you look at the SEC this year, who's going undefeated? Like, you point to the schedules and say, well, they've got to play this team. Everybody's got to play those teams. Like, by the time you get to the SEC championship, there's a very good chance neither team is undefeated. You might have a 3-loss team in your SEC championship game, and then it all comes down to one game.
The tiebreak, like Oklahoma knocks off somebody to get a tiebreaker edge that gets them into a second spot. You mentioned who's going undefeated. Even Georgia has to go play. Georgia plays Alabama and Texas. Yeah,
there are legitimately 8 teams in this league that if they make the playoff this year, you're not going to be surprised. You'd be like, yeah, of course. That's how deep the league is.
All right. So F1. Yeah, this is, I think that this is right. Somebody said, I was talking to a golf writer from Austin. Let me check this. Oh my gosh. So I think the Austin F1 race is the same week as Georgia at Texas. Oh, it's a lot of energy around
Max
Austin.
Verstappen out there flipping the coin.
Yeah, let's go. Okay, so yeah, I'm with Texas A&M. Tom with Oklahoma. I like that there. Danny, let's go to the All Coast Conference. Who is the ACC dark horse you got your eyes on?
So I was surprised when I was doing this exercise, and I think I did ACC third, and I was surprised the odds weren't a little bit longer, especially from some of these teams that we had talked about. I think this is a team that already has a pretty special quarterback. We've talked about him on here a couple times. I like the direction the program is headed. Virginia Tech. Give me the Hokies at only plus 1,500. That's what I was kind of surprised at. I thought it would have been, plus 2,500 potentially. But Kyron Drones, we know we've talked a lot about him on here. He's dual threat, which puts you in a really tough position. Really started to evolve and develop as a passer last season. And then the schedule does set up pretty manageably for them. Vanderbilt, Marshall, Old Dominion, Rutgers, all winnable games. Then you go to Miami. That one, Miami will be the trendy pick. Miami looks like they should be better, the Cam Ward era. Then after that, at Stanford, Boston College, Georgia Tech, at Syracuse could be tricky. Clemson at home, where even if you lost that Miami game, that place is going to be absolutely epic. Clemson's still in that vicinity where they haven't really proven they're the dominant team they were a few years ago. So I think, I don't know. I like Kyron Drones a lot. I like Brent Pry. Just love his. I talked to him Amelia Island. He's really happy with the roster. Think they come
He's got everybody back.
Yeah,
I mean, he's got everybody back. All right, so they went 7-6 last year, 6-6 to make the bowl game, go win the bowl game. When they won, they crushed teams. All 7 of Virginia Tech's wins were by at least 17 points last year. Like, they took some tough losses, no doubt, but when they got up, they were not messing around or playing with their food. They beat teams thoroughly, and that's incredibly impressive. I got another one in the ACC. Tom, where are you at? I like that though, 100%.
First, before I get to my pick, on Thursday's mailbag, I called out Bob2794524 blah 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 for giving us a 1-star review because we shortchanged the ACC while we were doing our
easiest
schedules last week, and he said he apologized. He said he changed his review back to 5 stars. So shout out, Bob. But the critique was understood. He understood what we were coming from.
That was June 10th.
Yeah,
we lost track of the clock.
And we were like 60 minutes into the show, and but for me, like, it's funny, we talk about the Big 12 being like a random number generator of a league, and if you look at the odds for the ACC on FanDuel, like, Utah's plus 290 to win the Big 12, and it's the favorite. Florida State's the favorite to win the ACC. They're only plus 270. So this is considered to be a more wide open league than the first two we've talked about. And we talked about him early in the show. It's NC State. I just think that Dave Doran has proven over the years that he can compete in this league. And while they haven't broken through to win the conference, they have beaten the teams that win the conference. And I think that if things go right, they can get to the ACC championship game. And I think particularly the schedule, we talked about it earlier, the Tennessee game. They can lose that game. It doesn't impact their schedule. Their first ACC game is at Clemson, which they could very easily lose because it's freaking Clemson and it's on the road. So we're looking at a situation where NC State could be 2-2 to start the year and completely written off, which then allows the Wolfpack to just kind of fly under the radar with nobody really paying any attention. And after that Clemson game, man, does things get a lot easier. They've got Northern Illinois, Wake at home, Syracuse at home. They have to go to Cal, which Chip is terrified of. They get the bye. They get Stanford at home, Duke at home, another bye, and then they finish with consecutive road games against Georgia Tech and North Carolina, which won't be easy. But I just think that this is a team that could kind of just fly under the radar all year, especially if they lose those Clemson and Tennessee games. And then it comes up, it's November, and we're like, hey, look, if you've been checking out NC State, they're like a win away from clinching an ACC championship game berth.
Yeah, they beat Clemson last year. They beat Florida State the year before. The seniors on this team have experience of beating everybody in the league. So there's not any like mental hurdle for them to jump over. It's so funny talking to NC State fans and specifically season ticket holders, because there's number one, man, this home schedule, I don't know. But the other side of that is you've got games you can win. You know, like it's so funny because you want to have the massive game, but at the same time, you want to win them, right? So it is a 100% favorable schedule for NC State. I'm gonna go with the newcomer. I'm gonna go with SMU.
Yeah,
I think SMU at plus 1,800 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook They do not play Clemson. They do not play NC State. They do not play Virginia Tech. They host Florida State at home. They do not play Miami. I mean, you could watch. I mean, you talk about a look up and you're running the conference title scenarios and you're like, okay, so all that. And by the way, they're off. They've got an off week in November 9th. You could look up and be like, all right, so all SMU needs to do is beat Boston College, Virginia, and Cal, and they're going to have a spot in the ACC title game. Not only do I think Preston Stone's a pretty good quarterback and that Rhett Lashley's a good offensive coach, but remember when Kevin Jennings came in and we were like, hey, this guy's okay too. They went to the transfer portal, and one of the things that they prioritized in the transfer portal was to get big bodies with power conference experience on the defensive line. And that is understanding what you need to do. When Steve Sarkisian took over a program that was then going to be moving to the SEC, he said, we got to be awesome at the line of scrimmage. He made that a priority. And I think that as Rhett Lashley looked at his team this offseason, the fact that so many of the top-rated prospects in SMU's transfer class are 6'6", 320-pound defensive linemen from power conferences, he seems to understand that having that beef, that's going to be the place where the jump from the American Athletic Conference, where, by the way, they won last year, undefeated in the regular season in conference play, that the jump up in competition is going to start at the line of scrimmage. He probably feels like, I got the offensive side handled. Let's work on this defensive line depth. I think that was a smart move. So I like SMU as my dark horse in the ACC.
Only thing I don't love, I think they could absolutely be the surprise. They could be the dark horse. Historically, where's the team that's made that jump from a group of 5 to Power 5 that immediately, because I think SMU is going to be fine in the ACC. Like, they might be one of the ones that perennially, I just do think while they kind of catch up a little bit, the schedule gets tougher where, like, how do you do against the quote grind? I know the ACC is not the SEC or Big Ten, but there are teams with more depth, with bigger bodies, better rated players. That's the only reason I would stay away from it. Wouldn't be surprised at all if they're in the mix and if they did win it, but for me, I would need to see it first.
Okay, so
I don't see it happening at all. I think SMU's fine long run. Year one is way too much to ask for them to be a dark horse to win the league. Like, this isn't Oklahoma and Texas joining the SEC where you have that pedigree. This is SMU joining a Power 5 league. Like, if you look at SMU last year, they played 3 Power 4 teams. They lost to Oklahoma by 17. They lost to TCU by 17. And then in the Wasabi Fenway Bowl, they played a bottom tier ACC team in Boston College, and they lost that game too. Like, I think the grind will matter. I think going from a schedule last year that was filled with American athletic teams who were, let's be real, mostly Conference USA teams in the new look American Athletic, jumping up to an ACC. No, the ACC is not the Big Ten and it's not the SEC, but it sure as hell ain't Conference USA and the American either. I think it is going to take SMU a couple years to adjust. And then I think with their footprint, with their recruiting, and with all that stuff, they will be able to rise up above a lot of the bottom half teams in that league. But year one, I think you're asking for way too much.
I'm not arguing with that point, but to provide context, one of the only examples that I can pull of not an ACC to a Big Ten or, among power conferences, but a true group of 5 into a power conference, it's another team from Texas, where TCU was playing for Big 12 titles 3 years into its Big 12 existence. Now, that was year 3, not year 1.
How'd they do in year 1?
4-5, 5-4, 7-6. They were a bowl team, middle of the road. And so, you're not wrong, but we're dealing with the same small school, well-funded, talent-rich state. If it can be done, then I would say that SMU's got a chance to do it. All right, Danny, do you need to go? You want to give your Big 12?
Yeah, let me get Big 12 in here.
Right.
Ryan in the chat, I got you. UCF, give me the Knights. We talked a little bit about them last week, made the prediction that within a decade, I think they could compete for, national titles. I think this year they could come in. It is year 2 in the Big 12 after making that jump. I think KJ Jefferson could absolutely tear it apart in Gus Malzahn's system. I know this past year was a little bit of a down year, but Gus has been, pretty strong. I think a lot of that had to do with the jump that they were taking. The schedule's manageable. Tom talked about their backfield. I think that's like the perfect pairing for what Gus wants to do. I think they absolutely could win it. In this league, I think you can make a case for a ton of teams as a dark horse in the Big 12 and feel like, yep, I could see it happening with a bunch of different teams, but I'll go with UCF.
Yeah, this is not the Big Ten. This is the opposite of the Big Ten in terms of the prices on the odds board, right? Like the favorite, as you mentioned, Tom, Utah plus 290 is the longest odds for a favorite that we have in a power conference. And we don't have that huge jump down to 2,500 at the fifth name right here. You don't even get down to 2,500 until you're past West Virginia, TCU, and Arizona and Texas Tech. So a huge collection of teams right here. Tom, who's your pick?
Like Danny said, there are like 85 different teams in this league. I think you could reasonably pick and nobody would look at you sideways. I was down to 2. I picked Iowa State in my column about like playoff Cinderellas last week in that they could reach the playoff. But the one concern I have with Iowa State is the end of their schedule gets pretty tough. And late in the year, at that point, they could be beaten up and blah, blah, blah. So I'm going with Oklahoma State. If you look at their schedule, yes, they have to play Utah, but unlike Iowa State, they get to play Utah in Stillwater. They have to play Kansas State on the road. That is tough. But after those 2 games, it opens up pretty considerably. Like you get West Virginia at home. You have your bye. You've got BYU on the road, Baylor on the road, Arizona State. Like that BYU, Baylor, Arizona State stretch, that's, to me, even with 2 of those games on the road, that's 3 wins for the Cowboys. You get TCU on the road. Then you get another bye and you finish with Texas Tech and at Colorado, which, as we mentioned earlier in the show with the coin flip games, Colorado depth. When would you rather play them, early or late? I would rather play them late. And you just look at the pedigree of what Oklahoma State has done in this league under Mike Gundy. When Oklahoma and Texas were still in it, who was the one team that was typically year-on-a-year annual basis the big thorn in their side, the one real contender that could, disrupt it? TCU obviously had the great year, but overall, Oklahoma State has been that team. So with those 2 out, with Mike Gundy's track record and the Cowboys' track record overall, with Ollie Gordon, one of the best running backs in the country, in a league where there's going to be a lot of coin flip games, I'll take my Oklahoma State and the Cowboys.
The offense is not just, even beyond Ollie Gordon, we are mostly intact from last year. Brennan Presley is a very good wide receiver. Offensive line pretty much still together from last year. A team last year, by the way, that went 10-4. And how about this one? So, yeah, maybe they do find themselves in a spot where they're an underdog. They don't have as much talent. Their power rating doesn't line up. Since 2015, Oklahoma State 9-2 against the spread and 9-2 straight up as an underdog at home against Big 12 foes. When you get Utah coming to Stillwater and your experience from the last 9 seasons has been beating teams as an underdog in Stillwater, it's a good trend to be able to ride right there.
Here's a better game to play. How many losses does the Big 12 champion have? I'm going to say 3.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say over under 2.5.
That's there's so many coin flip games in this league. If we did that segment at the start of the show, we're going to be doing it all month. We could just do the entire All-State 12, like every single game on the schedule, every single week. Coin flip game, coin flip game, coin flip game. That's why this league is going to be fun. Like if you are one of those people who has long decried the lack of parity in college football, then you better be watching the Big 12 this season, because this league is giving you everything you've claimed you've wanted. So we'll see how many of you really wanted parity all along.
I think Texas Tech. Yeah. It's so funny. You can't even do hard schedule, easy schedule in the Big 12.
Oh, because they're all the same damn schedule.
Yeah, I'm going to go Texas Tech here. I think that they finished 7-6 last year, 5-4 in conference play. I think they were a shade better than that overall. And that when you're looking for positive regression, that Texas Tech might be in the random number generator, might be set to be able to snap back there. In conference play, they start off with like Arizona State and Cincinnati at home. What a great way to like get your feet under you. Then you go You play at Arizona, bye, Baylor, at TCU, at Iowa State, then Colorado, then bye. And then this is the big one, going to play at Oklahoma State late in the year in West Virginia. I think Texas Tech, I feel pretty confident that Texas Tech will be going into that November 23rd game at Oklahoma State in the Big 12 title race.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about whether they can flip those two. West Virginia was another team I considered, but ultimately, let's go with Baron Morton. Let's go with Joey McGuire, and let's go with the Red Raiders as my pick, which at FanDuel Sportsbook, you can get at plus 1,100.
Yeah, and like that Arizona game on the road is probably going to be their first real test. But in a way, like you mentioned, like they start with Abilene Christian, they get Wazoo on the road, but I have no idea what the hell Wazoo or Oregon State are going to be this year. You get North Texas, Arizona State, you should win. Cincinnati's a game you should win. So like as far as just building confidence, this is a team that could be feeling really good about itself when it goes on that first road trip to face Arizona. So like, yeah, it's they've got a chance to get some momentum going and carry that through.
All right. Any G5 dark horses, and then we'll get to your playoff category that I know you've got.
I mean, that's the thing in the G5. It's like, are there really dark horses? Like, it's going to be Liberty. They're going to go undefeated, and then they're going to make the playoff. Like, if I look around the other leagues, I think Memphis is a team that could have a strong season. I don't know if I would consider them a dark horse because, again, they need to go undefeated as well. That is going to be very difficult for them to do in the MAC.
USF is my pick there, but they're third on the odds board. So it's not even like it really categorizes as a deep dark horse. I think that your AAC champ is either Memphis, Tulane, or USF.
Yeah, that's kind of how I view the AAC. You look in Conference USA. Again, I have no dark horse.
No.
You look in the MAC. I don't know. Like Bowling Green, is that a dark horse? Like I think Ohio could take a small step back this season.
Small.
But I'm saying like Ohio could still just be Ohio. Like we looked at that team in recent years and kind of wrote it off, and Curtis Work came in and they still won a bunch of games. So
they've lost like 12 starters, including 8 of them since they finished spring practice.
I know.
It's
the MAC.
They're going to be doing the back pedal like a defensive back at the combine, baby.
It's the MAC.
All right, fair.
We have no idea.
The margin of separation is very small.
In the Mountain West, like Colorado State to me is my dark horse because I do think that when they brought in Jay Norvell, that is a program to me. They haven't had the results there yet, but they do have the buy-in, both spiritually and economically, to make that a good football program. So going into this year under Norvell, I could see the Rams taking a step forward. And the Mountain West was very much a kind of wide open race last year. It was a very fun league to watch. And I think Colorado State is a team this year that can make the step forward. So as far as my G5 dark horses, that's who I have. In the Sun Belt, I don't really have anybody.
Yeah, Texas State's too far down. That was where I was starting. Like before I opened the tab for the Sun Belt Conference odds, which by the way, Conference odds just populated in the last 2 weeks or so.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went in to go look at the Sun Belt, I was like, oh, nice. Texas State got Jordan McLeod, the old James Madison quarterback, late in the cycle. This could be another example of GJ Kinney following up a good start, and daggum, they are second on the odds board. There ain't nothing dark horse about the Bobcats, Spavs boys, as we so lovingly call them.
Yeah, like the West in the Sun Belt could be very interesting this year because I need to see what happens to Troy now that Summerall's gone.
Yeah.
Like that, I don't know who's going to win that division. That entire division could be a dark horse, I guess. Maybe not ULM, but everybody else.
One question for you back on the Mountain West. Would you take a Sean Lewis San Diego State Flyer at plus 2,100?
Yeah, for sure.
That
team's going to score a buttload of points.
Right. And
it's going to be very, very hard for us to get used to as late night San Diego State under enthusiasts, seeing the Aztecs putting up 40 points a game. You and I we'll probably shudder more than we will at the name, the All-State 12.
Right. App State is the favorite in the Sun Belt, plus 350. They're bringing back their quarterback. And you like Conference USA.
It's not fair.
It's not. All you would be doing is you'd be trying to pick who Liberty will play to create a hedge opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. That's the only thing you would be doing is trying to figure out a way to financially benefit yourself by choosing one of Western Kentucky, Jacksonville State, Sam Houston State, to wind up being able to be there. So you'd be there on the first Saturday in December with an opportunity to win both ways. All right. Before we get out of here, what about your teams that are maybe not favorites to make the playoff that you've got that you've got your eye on?
I'll go quick fire here. In the ACC, Virginia Tech, Syracuse, and Georgia Tech, I think could be potential surprise playoff at-large people. But I really don't think
Georgia Tech as an at-large?
I think Georgia Tech could. I mean, the ACC outside of, again, it's wide open. Florida State and Clemson are your favorites for obvious reasons. I don't think they're going to win the league. I think that they could have solid seasons and be in the at-large conversation. You get what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. Well, listen, I get what you're saying because I think Georgia Tech offensively could be great. I mean,
Defensively will be
defense is going to be a big question mark, but I think their wide receiver room's loaded up. Their top running back is back, and the Haynes King year one with the Yellow Jackets was good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
He led the ACC in touchdowns, and he led the ACC in interceptions. Georgia Tech to make the playoff, by the way, plus 6,000 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more.
Just throw $5 down.
I mean, let's see. So that's all right. Yeah, $5 pays out 300. Oh man, now all of a sudden.
Yeah, exactly. In the Big 12, I mean, everybody in the conference except for, I don't know. Who's the worst team you think of the Big 12?
The worst team in the Big 12?
Yeah, like Baylor. I feel like everybody but Baylor is an at-large possibility in the Big 12. But I also will say I don't think the Big 12 gets more than one team in. Like, I think the Big 12, you have to win the conference to get into the college football playoff. I don't think the second place team has a realistic shot. And then we get to the Big 10. USC was your dark horse. I would consider them a playoff dark horse at-large pretender. But then also Wisconsin, Rutgers, and Michigan State are the teams that I think could be surprises. Wisconsin, because we're going into year 2 of Fickell, and we know Fickell teams tend to do well. Rutgers is very much schedule based in that they don't play anybody. Like, they don't play any of the top 4 teams in the league. And Michigan State, I've got there as ceiling as if Aiden Childs is the chosen one. Michigan State could be a team that wins a whole lot of games and gets to like 10-2. In the SEC, again, the entire damn league, like LSU, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Mizzou, A&M. I will go the furthest I will go down the board as a possible at-large, and I wrote about them in my Cinderella story piece last week. Auburn, if they have injury luck, because they have the talent in the ones. When you get to the 2s and the 3s on the depth chart, they do not really stack up to this point against the rest of that league. But if they have injury luck, the receivers are a little bit better this year. Peyton Thorne's a little bit better. They can go 9-3 with a couple kind of marquee wins that would then get them an at-large berth if they spring an upset. So I don't believe in it, but I do think it's within the realm of possibility.
The odds makers clearly understanding SEC bias in the college football playoff selection process, because your Oklahoma dark horse plus 500, your Auburn dark horse plus 650, Wisconsin, which I think is more likely than both, is plus 900. And what was the other one that you just threw out there?
Rutgers and Michigan State.
Michigan State was the one I was like, ooh, I think Michigan State is also 6,000. Yeah, Michigan State plus 6,000, and the plus 6,000 bet that a very talented quarterback who is in his second year with who we think is a very good coach in a conference that can get 3 or 4 teams in the college football playoff.
Mm-hmm. And also, like with everything that happened in that program last year, like after Tucker got fired, like it's hard to know what to take seriously about the way they finished last year. Like with the new staff in, a lot of new players, and then again the quarterback. This is a team that could be a lot better than what we saw last year.
Fair, 100%. I feel like that those Wisconsin, Michigan State plays to make the playoff feel like more bang for your buck based on the path, when the Big Ten could easily be getting 3 or 4 in there than you would trying to go too deep on like the Big 12 or the ACC.
For sure.
Yeah. Awesome stuff. Went a little long today, but it was
demanded it.
People demanded it. It was good to get back rolling. We'll be having a summer school on Wednesday. We'll be back live on Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern time with a big old bag of mail. Come join us live, hang out in the tailgate, get in some live mailbag questions, or give us a 5-star review. And in that review, put your question. We will tackle it in a future mailbag episode. And you can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fornelli. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Tom, thank you very much.
Thank you.